Expect to see the system of getting health care change in this country. As far as this year, 2013, there are new rules, but most Americans probably won't notice major changes.
Mama Jean's Natural Market in Springfield likes to think it's doing its part
Mama Jean's really changed my life and changed my lifestyle
to keep customers and employees healthy by offering healthful foods and insurance plans for full-time workers.
I had worked in kitchens for years and had an unhealthy diet.
Just ask the company's marketing coordinator, Amy Harmon.
And so when I went to my job at Mama Jean's, I really wanted to make a change, and they helped facilitate that.
And what's going through the minds of the people who run this market is similar to what other businesses are thinking about upcoming changes under the health care law known as Obamacare.
We do expect changes at that time, and we're preparing for them, but we're not exactly sure what they will be.
But I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the minds of business owners, and they're trying to get information.
Partner with the accounting firm BKD, Jamie McDonald, says the biggest thing for businesses this year is to prepare for next year.
In 2013, they need to assess whether or not they're going to be required to provide health insurance to their employees. And that's basically to do a calculation to determine whether or not they have 50 full-time employees or not.
Also, those virtual marketplaces known as health exchanges start this year in October. It works a lot like a grocery store. The idea is to have the different insurance companies competing for your business and offering the best price. Of course, this is all online.
Navigators are going to be hired, so you'll be able to do that telephonically, but those folks have to be hired yet, and they have to be trained yet. And again, we're 8 months from implementation of the exchanges.
Vice President of Advocacy at Mercy in Missouri, Mike Peters, is watching the new law.
How we get insurance, where we get it from, will change quite a bit over the next 2 years.
New parts of the law kicking in this year include a tax on medical devices, an increase in Medicare taxes for those making $200,000 or more, limits to medical flexible spending accounts at $2,500 a year, and boosts to some Medicaid payments, raising them to higher Medicare rates for this year and next. So is the health care law achieving its goals?
I think the jury's still out. I think that the next year to 18 months will really determine that. And it's not so much, I mean, the finances are complicated enough. I don't profess to be an expert about those. But simply getting everything up and running.
The big question marks remain cost and coverage.
That's because some essential parts of the law haven't started yet. One question, if businesses pay more in insurance or penalties, will they pass those costs along to you? Hospitals are going to see a reduction in some payments this year. Peter says the expansion of Medicaid was supposed to help offset that. Now in states like Missouri, that expansion is uncertain. And then there's the question of costs of premiums. One thing the health care law doesn't do is cap premiums. Now, Peter says what it does do, though, is limit the percentage of those costs insurance can use for profits. And a survey from the Kaiser Family Foundation found employer-sponsored family premiums rose in 2012, and they increased faster than wages. However, the foundation considered the increase moderate in historical terms. Countries can print money, they can take loans, and also loan to other nations. And they can even outgrow debt. The ideas can seem abstract. Tonight, we look at the numbers like a family would to try to help you relate.
The numbers are monumental. This is a visualization that comes close to what the national debt is today. Some groups are trying to bring the numbers down to something more recognizable.
I think that we're in a lot of trouble. You know, if this were a household, if this were just a family, my family, your family, anybody's family, yeah, you'd be in big trouble.
That's Drury accounting student Brad Ray.
We have to exercise fiscal responsibility. We have to, so I believe that the federal government should have to do the same thing.
He's reacting to some numbers we showed him.
Oh, yeah,
You may have seen emails or Facebook posts with figures similar to this. This is one from a Tea Party group. It aims to make the government's debt and deficits look like a home budget. We looked over the numbers with a couple of economists, got data from the Treasury Department and St. Louis Fed, and came up with a similar chart based on the last fiscal year. Now just chop off a few zeros and the numbers look more like a household budget. Income, $24,500. That person or family would have spent more than 35 grand in a year taking on new debts. That kind of spending is like having $161,000 in credit card debt. Now consider this. Congress is looking at sequestration budget cuts, which are considered dramatic. If they go through, it would only cut this household spending by $1,000 this year.
Ooh. Cut down on it.
Steve Walton is getting his taxes done.
But I've worked hard to earn it, and I don't know where it's going.
Could you live on that? Would that work? That much debt?
Oh, no.
Didn't get it last year.
Walton is a groundskeeper at Evangel University. We asked Ray if this was an individual. How are we looking?
You'd be in terrible shape.
The two are they're similar in that they're using the words debt and deficits and things like that, but that's kind of where the comparison basically ends.
The director of the Missouri Bureau of Economic Research at Missouri State University, David Mitchell, cautions the debt of a government is much different than that of a family.
So when you look at the balance, when you look at the net holdings, it's actually not as bad as it seems, although it is a problem that needs to be addressed, but it's not like, oh my gosh, the whole economy is going to collapse tomorrow.
So here's a look at the national debt, more than $16 trillion. If you look here, though, nearly $5 trillion of that the government owes within itself through programs such as Social Security. Now, the more than $11 trillion here that's left is held by the public, and a lot of that is owned by taxpayers, corporations, and others.
The other half is owned by China and Japan for the most part. So they've lent us money, but we've also lent them money too.
For every dollar in foreign claims, the U.S. has 85 cents in claims on other countries. Still, U.S. taxpayer dollars in the future will then be going to other nations rather than staying here in U.S. communities. Now this becomes the basis for the next round of talks about spending. If the government doesn't act by March 1st, $1.2 trillion in automatic cuts are set to hit the federal government.
Dr. Mitchell has concerns about ballooning entitlement spending. He believes that deserves more attention than cuts to discretionary spending, such as defense. And interest rates for the U.S. right now are cheap, sometimes cheaper than free when you take into account inflation. Some believe running a deficit and a debt isn't a bad thing. They believe investment is needed to kickstart the economy. Finally, one of the most important numbers in this that we haven't mentioned so far is gross domestic product, or the size of the economy. You have an idea now of the size of the debt. Economists typically look at that figure, though, compared to GDP. Right now, the debt is around 100% of GDP, the highest level since the end of World War II.